Hello, my name is Josue Peralta. I'm here today without Michael. He's on vacation. What do you think, Doc?
Yeah, it sucks.
I miss
Couch
my
is
buddy
lonely
Mike.
without him.
I miss him. I got a question for you.
What's up?
What's one trait you admire in somebody else?
One trait I admire in someone else.
Yeah.
Um, One trait I admire in someone else that's close to me. I don't even know how to explain it, but they have this thing about them that they just make you feel special. I don't know if they got that on like tap or they know how to like use it, but just something about them. What about you?
Actually, Michael. One thing I enjoy about Michael and that I really admire about him is that I'm not even afraid to admit this, he's more courageous than I am. And
Makes
sometimes I
sense.
feed off of him. Like whenever we're doing something, I tend to be risky anyway, but there's other things where I tend to pull back on, but he is less risk adverse. So I'm like, oh, I guess, I guess we're doing this.
I mean, it makes sense. He's a Marine.
Yeah, yeah.
Aren't they the strong and the faithful or something like
The
that?
brave, the bold, the
Yeah.
Marine. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, and I've seen him like be super brave like a lot of times. That I'm just like, well, let's just not. He's like, okay, let's just do it. I'm like, okay, Mike, I'll ride off of your coattails of what do you call it? In that moment, I would categorize it as stupidity, but Mike's just like, nah, dog, we got this. So I'm like, okay, I messed with that heavy.
That's a good trait.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to have him because he has a whole lot of that when I don't. So that's pretty good.
He's a good guy.
I like him. Today's episode is called Soulful Standards, keeping with the S's here. And this season, we've been talking a lot about the preparation and the getting ready for a relationship. That's what this whole season is about. We've already talked about, first of all, setting the scene. Then we talked about getting your mentals in order. Then we talked about getting the what do you call it, the other parts in order, whether it's your money, your emotions in order, things like that. And then last week we talked about making sure to have friends because they're the ones that are going to link you up to a potential partner and the importance of having friends. But today I want to have a discussion on entering the arena of dating with the right mindset, with purpose and intention.
Okay.
And also direction I have on here too on my notes. I feel like having a discussion on balancing what we want / what we need and versus what that looks like in execution or in reality is important because a lot of times, we can say, oh, we want X type of woman or X type of guy in your case, but that characteristics or those things usually don't translate one to one, because when I say I want somebody who's joyful and silly may mean something completely different to you. And well, you may say, oh, hey, look at this person, or, look at this woman. She's nice and she's cool. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's not all the same. And also the fact that, when we talk about standards and stuff like that, it's not all like, what do you call it? Like you're not going to get everything you want.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, somebody can be silly and joyful, which is what you want, but that also brings a lot of other characteristics that you may not like. So people are a package deal. You got to decide what's more important and what you can deal with. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. There was a show that came out in the 90s called Dharma and Greg, which, yeah, probably nobody that hears the sound of my voice can probably
Did you hear
knows
it on
about
a
it.
YouTube channel?
It's on Prime, but it's about this guy who's a lawyer. He's the straight man. He does everything that he's supposed to do, and then he meets this girl named Dharma, who, by the way, that name is already ridiculous, but she's free spirited and outgoing and hippie, kind of, kind of stuff that I like. But that comes with a lot of, what do you call it, baggage for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
That comes with a lot of stuff that you didn't really, or that
Want.
Greg didn't really anticipate. So in the show, in the very first episode, they meet each other as kids, and then they kind of see each other again as adults, and then they kind of remember that time where they met as kids, and then instead of like going through the dating phase, they just go to Vegas and get married that same day, and then they realize
The first episode?
very first episode. So they get married before they even go on their first date. And then they're like, well, how the heck are we going to do this now? And he comes from a wealthy family who, does everything right, quote unquote. And then she comes from a hippie family who's all about juicing, who's all about, don't have a social security number because the government can track you, or take baths because, you connect better with the earth that way. So the whole show is about them and how you can make a relationship work even if you're, what do you call it?
Totally
Completely
different.
Totally different. But that just means that you have to work extra hard at it. But it can work. But I mean, I bring it up just because, Dharma, while she's exciting and, eccentric, she also comes with some downfall or, some, what do you call it? Some things that come along with that. Like she actually enjoys sleeping on the roof. And then Greg's like, well, what happens when it rains? And then she's like, well, you have sex when it rains. And then it just,
Okay.
I'm like, okay, that's a interesting solution to an interesting problem.
I mean, they say polar opposites attract. And it could be that, I don't know, I didn't watch the show, but tell me if I'm wrong, they probably balance each other out. Where she, in the stuff that she's careless about, he probably is more responsible.
Yes.
And then in the stuff that she's more like happy-go-lucky about, balances him out, his probably more uptight personality.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Although in the beginnings of season 1, it's more towards him becoming like less of a stuck-up good dude than her becoming more responsible. Because at the end of the day, if Dharma becomes responsible, then she's not eccentric, and the show goes to hell. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, that aside, I want to make sure we have a discussion on the difference between desires, standards, boundaries.
Okay.
As we kind of talk about this. But when I mentioned that the purpose of this episode was to enter, just making sure you have the right mindset before you enter the dating arena, to enter it with purpose and direction. I feel like as Christians, we should enter the arena of dating with the purpose of, what do you call it? Oh, I'm sorry, with dating with a purpose rather than casual encounters. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. As Christians, I believe the goal is marriage. So if that's your goal, you need to have that purpose. Whereas if you're doing it casually, I feel like you lose focus of what it is you want. And then, I mean, that applies to everything, even being non-Christian. If you want, if your goal is to get that job or whatever, but you don't focus on it or you don't do the right things to get it, where you're just applying willy-nilly but not actually like honing your skills, the odds of you getting the job are very low, and then it could delay your success. So it's very important as Christians, if marriage is the goal, to have that purpose from the get-go so that you start on the right path.
I feel like you can avoid a lot of heartbreak too, and avoid taking, detours that lead you down paths that you don't want to go. That can lead you to places that you never thought you would go, but you ended up there anyway because you didn't go in with the right mindset.
Yeah, and it also not only heartbreak, but I feel like conserves your notion of what love is and what a relationship is, and keeping according to God's design. I feel like sometimes when you date a lot or you just do it without a purpose, it can go to something transactional. Whereas I just go out with someone and you can even become disconnected. You get different scars. And little by little, that the concept of what love is and what dating is and the way God has it just starts eroding little by little. And then it's no wonder that sometimes if we do fall into that trap as Christians, that we struggle getting back to it because it's just, not even in our forethought anymore.
Right. And then we may not even know what that looks like. Like coming back from that.
Yeah, so then you got to pray to God so he can, work with your thoughts, so he can pretty much erase all the bad stuff you acquired and fill you up with all his goodness and his good intentions, so
To
that
be
you
a
have
spiritual version.
Yeah, exactly. To have that.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'll be honest with you and say that casual dating is attractive to me in the sense that there's no commitment. So you get quote unquote all of the benefits, but none of the responsibility, or at least lessened responsibility, right? Because in casual, you can be like, okay, well, I'm free to hang out tonight. And then it's just kind of like a booty call, not literal booty call, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you are dating with intention, it's more like, oh crap, I can't even embark upon this unless I actually want to marry this person. Like I can't just have fun. But truth is, you can have fun just as friends. You don't have to casually date.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also attractive because in a way it kind of takes away the consequences of it, right? Like if you, what am I trying to say? So like if if you're just doing it casually, right, you don't think that much of the consequences of what it's going to do to you or the other person. So you might do things without thinking. Whereas when you're more intentional, you kind of, well, if I react this way, this has a consequence. And, that consequence, it can either be heavy or it can be light. And then at least you're more prepared if you're conscious of the consequences. But when you're doing it just casually, it's like consequences can come, I don't care, but they're still going to come. And they can feel like being more severe, if that makes any sense.
I think another thing would be that you can avoid lost time, especially, us older adults who want to marry for real and who want to date for real. You can avoid a lot of wasted time to where you can, be casually dating, or I can be casually dating Rachel. And then all of a sudden, I meet up with another girl who I actually have chemistry with, but I'm already emotionally entangled with someone else who's expecting something of me. So then I'm not even in a position to engage with, let's call her Rachel number 2.
Yeah.
And then now I'm losing out on the timing, where that's the biggest thing when it comes to dating, or one of the biggest things. It's timing. I think I read somewhere, or I forget where I saw it, but it's like once chemistry is there, the only thing keeping people apart is timing, or something like that. So it's like,
I could see that.
Yeah. So dating without a purpose puts you in places that you don't necessarily want to be, even though it can be fun and has its allures. It's just not.
The thing is, you don't know when you're going to meet your person or when you're going to meet the love of your life. So if you're with someone else, you might meet them just casually, but you're in a relationship, and like you can miss your window. Whereas
It's true.
if you're single and purposeful and you meet them, you're open, you're free, you got time in your agenda, you're not wasting your time. Like Matthew Hussey says, saying no to the wrong person faster gets you closer
To your real yes.
to you're finding your person, whereas entertaining bad company for longer.
That's true. Let's talk about, like I said, the differences between desires, standards, and boundaries. Again, approaching the dating scene with the right mindset.
I think before that, though, I think we should talk a little bit about expectations versus standards.
Tell me more.
I feel like sometimes people can confuse the two. And it's easy to confuse sometimes because they kind of run in the same atmosphere, but they're not.
And they sound similar.
And they sound similar, but they're not the same. Like, for example, like an expectation is something outside of yourself, something that you are waiting for someone to do. So that's out of you. Whereas a standard, it's something that comes from you
from within.
That you do. Like, for example, and we see a lot of romantic movies where like the guy does a romantic gesture, and like as girls sometimes we can fall into the temptation of expect that all guys are going to be like that, and then you don't vocalize it, right? And then you can start dating, and then you realize, why didn't they do that, like, and you expect it, and then you get mad, and it's like, dude, they're not mind readers. Whereas a standard, it's something that comes from you, not only that you apply to yourself, but you communicate it to others, in a right way, so that that they know what's up. Like, if you want flowers, I say I want flowers.
Is that an expectation or a standard?
That I want flowers and I vocalize it.
Yes.
I think it can be a standard. Like, I want flowers. Really? The way you phrase it, right? Like, for example, like I want flowers. Like, that's something. Like, let's say for you, like, if you get fresh flowers, let's say for Friday, every day in your house, and then you get like I get a relationship or something, and like that's just a standard of mine that that I can do or the other person can do. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad example, but
give me an example of each.
Of an expectation
versus a standard.
Well, they can be. I feel like expectations fall more of like implicit of like you have to do this, whereas a standard is more of a request.
I feel like a standard is more like a sifting thing. So if we were to like how you go to the beach and you like sift through the sand, I feel like that's what a standard is, to where like you don't even get to expectations unless you pass through a standard to begin with. So then that way, you don't expect of somebody who doesn't even meet your standards anyway.
That's why I think it's tricky between the two. I think an expectation can fall into more when you don't communicate your standard. Because like you're saying, if your standard is first before an expectation, if you don't communicate this but you expect it, that's an expectation. And that can be unhealthy. You have to communicate this. So that's why they're tricky standards. Because they're like they're both there. Well, whereas a standard is something you can control, but an expectation is something you can't control because it's an action that you're asking from another person and you can't control anybody.
Let's get back to that because I'm a little lost.
Okay.
What else should we talk about before we get to desires and standards in that discussion?
Communication is the key to all of this, to desires, standards, everything. You have to know what you want and then communicate it. And then we should talk more about how it is that we know what we want throughout this episode, because that guides everything.
That's true. And I think people should abide by being explicit. Don't leave things up to the imagination. So I was getting a paper graded for my master's, and it kept getting returned for whatever reason. It was a stupid reason to begin with, but I guess the person who was grading it, or the professor who was grading it, wasn't reading it correctly in my point of view, and I had a meeting with one of the counselors to kind of help me see what the heck was up, and they're like, "Well, it's in the paper. I see it. Just make it explicit, even though you put it in a very convincing and flowery way. Just make it explicit so that they have nowhere to run." I feel like if you communicate your desires and your standards and boundaries in an explicit way, in clear way that people can understand, that way there is no, or just say it leaves space for a little gray area. And that's where a lot of the hurt in misunderstandings can come in when you don't communicate super clearly.
Because you don't communicate and then you expect it.
Right. That happens a lot.
Which women. And men too.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, that happens a lot with, I guess.
With everybody. It's just because it's hard because it's so easy to say you got to be explicit about what you want. But we also realize that vocalizing what you want is a very vulnerable thing to do.
Which is why
especially if it's something from like the most deepest part of your heart. So being vulnerable is scary. And if you're not used to it, it's no wonder you're not going to communicate, because you don't want to put yourself in this vulnerable position of not only stating what you want, but then being scared that the person is going to say no. Yes. It's like I'm putting my heart out here on my sleeve and then you're rejecting it. So we have to learn that regardless of if someone accepts or does what we request, we have to learn that it's okay to be vulnerable and share. Even because, sure, the other person didn't accept it or didn't take it or whatever. But at the end of the day, you did it for yourself. And, that validates who you are as a person. And it just, it gets it off your chest. And you're just lighter, because even though it didn't come to fruition, you tried. And the rest is on them. That's their sin, not yours.
Yep. That's a good way to put it. Okay. Speaking of communication, let's talk about desires and not only like having those desires in your wish list, as I put it on here, but how to communicate those. So what are your thoughts on like having a wish list for your partner when you're looking for somebody in the dating space?
The infamous lists of characteristics and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it can be good. And I think it can also be bad. It also depends how you go about making this list. Because you can just name it off as a whole bunch of characteristics. He needs to be tall, blah, 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 all this stuff. Whereas if you focus it more on what it is that you need, like your standards, where you phrase it from that point of view, I think it's helpful. But when you just see it as a grocery list of like, check, he has brown hair, check, he has blue eyes, like, I think it can take away your focus on the essence of the person, which is, I think, the most important part, like their values and stuff. But if you just focus on a list of external characteristics but not their morals and stuff, it can be dangerous.
Yeah. How I put it was just like, I think they're great. Just don't set yourself up for failure. I think society has messed up what we ought to expect. And I think it does that. It's done that through media, through television, have you ever seen an ugly person in a TV show?
Yeah.
But barely any. They're usually all good looking and everybody's attractive.
Yeah, but have you ever actually looked up the actors? Sometimes, like, you don't even recognize them. Like, you see them in a show, they look this way, but then you look them up as an actor and they look totally different. Like, the power of makeup is real. Like, not just women, but men wear makeup in movies. Like,
okay, so name one guy
even models, bad. Even models, dude. Like, they just need the physical structure. Everything else can be made. Your eyebrows, your eyes, everything else can be made to look good. So as long as you got the physical, like the strong jaw, we can make it look nice, So,
and you can contour with makeup different, like what do you call it, like a smaller nose or
exactly,
like gaunter cheeks.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So if you got the structure, you can do a lot. So, there are ugly people on TV, but they're made to look their best for the show. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I think specifically society has messed up our expectations on looks. Because even though you may call this person ugly, I feel like TV ugly is different than real world ugly.
Well, yeah.
And ugly is just a catch-all term here. I don't necessarily mean ugly for ugly's sake.
Yeah.
But it's trained us, and specifically like social media too. If like there are a ton of beautiful women on social media, just a ton. I was randomly on my search page on Instagram, and then I saw this this folk artist. Her name is Matilda. She's, first of all, a great
you
name.
Like her.
Second of all, she's absolutely stunning, just like out of nowhere. And then A couple days later, I see another woman who's completely different style, did completely different type of woman, and I'm like, dude, where are you guys? Because y'all ain't in Wisconsin, and it's clear.
I mean,
And none of
there's
you
a
are
lot of pretty
Adventists.
girls in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just you don't know them.
Yeah, it's true. And Instagram tends to push like what the majority likes versus what's real world or like girl next door cute.
And you also forget that a lot of these images are edited or contorted to look a certain way. So you don't know if the person looks like that in real life until you meet them.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that especially applies to guys where I feel like we have a tendency, generally speaking, to fall into looking for the prettiest girl in the room and ignoring the,
Less attractive girl.
for lack of a better term, yeah, but that doesn't mean that she's ugly.
No, it
She's
doesn't.
just less attractive. In doing so, you may miss out on a good girl.
Yeah. Usually, I mean, the less attractive people have the best personalities.
So, a psychologist I was listening to, he says to find your ugly duckling for guys, and what that means is find your girl who didn't grow up being one of the most conventionally attractive, because then she had to develop a personality. So then when she did grow older and glow up, then it's like, oh, okay, then you're then you really find like somebody with personality and looks too. But I would the point in saying that is just to say that society has messed up, I guess, our overall expectations on looks, and that we should be careful when we talk about, you know, our wish list or narrowing down to the type of girl we want. Like
Yeah.
like, oh, well, she has to be less than 120 pounds or something like that. Or for girls, he has to be, what's that word, Abby?
What?
6 feet tall.
Oh,
Like the typical expectations of women for guys.
is that they're tall?
Well,
They're taller.
it's a 666, right? It's the devil's trilogy,
Wow.
which is you have six figure. He has to make six figures. He has to be 6 feet tall, and has to have a six pack.
See,
That's the trinity.
yeah, but I feel like
society tends to put up there.
that's pushed a lot in social media, but I feel like in real life, like your typical girl is not thinking of a 666. If anything, she'll just take the 6 foot guy.
And have him be like not rich.
I mean,
you're saying like a girl.
if you find a guy that's rich and tall,
That's
I
a
mean,
win.
that's cool too. But
so you're saying women would choose a taller, poorer guy than a richer, smaller dude?
a lot of the time, yeah. Like for me,
Oh my God.
for example, I want a guy that's taller than me, and that's not
not
hard
hard.
because I'm 5'1", but preferably, you know, someone over at least 5'10". Here's my reasoning. My reasoning is I equate height with safety.
That's women in general.
Exactly. So for me, height, wanting a guy to be like 6 foot tall is not necessarily something superficial. I just see it as something as the taller you are, the safer. I can defer that you might be able to make me feel. And if since safety is something very important to me, I equate it with that. So that's like, I haven't met you, but yet if you're taller, the odds of you probably making me feel safe are higher. So I don't see it as something superficial. I see it more as in like what it can bring me.
So what about like the shorter, buff guys?
The shorter buff guys, I mean, that like it goes back to like I would have to get to know them more. Whereas if I see a taller guy, I can probably
He's already like gone through that first filter. Just because of the height.
And since I equate height more with safety, but with the shorter dude, I would probably have to get him know him more to get that feeling of safety just because he's a little shorter. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of guys, I guess like we have standards when it comes more to looks. And I'm not saying that, you know, all guys want your typical Instagram model, because personally that's not even something that attracts me to begin with. But we do want somebody who is let's call it on the skinnier side, generally speaking. So all that just to say that it's okay to have standards, or what do you call it, to have desires and know what you like, but just don't set yourself up for failure and be realistic. And one thing I will point out is that Ellen White, she tells us to focus on qualities. She says that true love is attracted by qualities alone.
I
So
mean,
if there is a girl out there who I may not be completely attracted to physically, but everything else clicks, you know, maybe don't discard that
there is a
opportunity.
phenomenon where the more you get to know someone and spend time with them, they be somehow they become more
Attractive to you.
attractive to you. So, like, she might not be the most prettiest girl or the prettiest guy, but the more you get to know them, you begin to your focus changes and your frame changes, where you're not looking at it from just qualities, but more like a package, and like it makes a beautiful person, not just an attractive person you don't know.
I call it the seating chart phenomenon, to where there was this girl, we had physics together, and this was in high school, and I wasn't typically attracted to her, just, walking down the halls. But the more that I spent time with her, the more I was like, dang, Rachel, I'm a fan of you. And this is, I like what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
And I think another thing when it comes to the wish list and your desires is to, and maybe I'm wrong here, so feel free to correct me, is to look more for compatibility, because chemistry you can build. What do you think?
I agree 100% with that. Look for those traits that you want and you need, more like honesty, like responsibility, respect, all those type of things. And even looks you can correct. Like
That's true.
I remember this friend of mine.
You can lose weight
Yeah,
and you
sure.
can become way more attractive.
Yeah. She gave me this advice. She's like, he can always lose weight, like you said. Like, if he has a cute face, he can lose the weight. But, like, you can fix the looks, but at the same time, you can't go in with the expectation that they will lose
That
the
they will
weight,
lose the
right?
weight, right?
You have to, when you fall in love with someone or you accept them, you have to accept them as they are right now, not as what you think they're going to be or what you think they're going to do. Because sometimes that can be an expectation that you think of, like, oh, okay, we're gonna get together and then they're gonna do this, and then it's like they don't do that, and then you're like, well, what the heck? And it's like that's your unrealistic expectation there coming to light of like what you thought could have been, but it's not reality.
It's not reality. Yeah, I agree. Um, what do you think about like I know there are some people who won't consider someone if there isn't an initial spark. Are you of the mindset that there has to be an initial spark, or that you can kind of gain a spark later on?
I think you can gain the spark later on, but at first there has to be mutual interest. I think interest does not necessarily mean the spark. It just means like the desire to get to know someone. Um, so I,
True.
so like for me personally, that mutual interest, I think that's what I would look for first before the spark. And then, if anything, if I'm breaking it off with someone, I'll just say we didn't have the spark. When I actually meet, I just didn't see that connection or that mutual interest.
And I think that's something that's a non-negotiable. You can't get together with somebody who you don't like just vibe with. There's just something that I feel you can't communicate well enough. Like it's just incommunicable, I guess is the word I'm looking for. That is between two people, that if it isn't there, it's just not going to work out, even if everything looks good on paper. Because there's some like there's some girls that that I would be great with on paper. On my birthday, you guys were like, you should get together with her. you guys would be great together. Like everything like lines up. She's everything that you would want. And it's like, y'all don't know. That's just not how that works. There has to be something incommunicable. Like I said, like that chemistry that
But
you can come to build it, but it needs to be there.
See, I disagree. I think that chemistry builds as you get to know someone, because I feel like that type of chemistry that is innate sometimes just comes from looks of like, oh, she's hot, or oh, he's good looking, and then you talk, and then you're like, obviously like looking each other up and down, and you're like, like, yeah, like, and then you say that's chemistry. Whereas like if that's the other person's not as attractive and you're not like getting those sensations, I think those bodily sensations, then you're like, okay, we don't have the chemistry. Whereas I feel like that type of chemistry that grows comes more from qualities where not just physicality. So I think you have to learn to differentiate for yourself what type of chemistry it is that you are wanting.
That's fair. So then what would you call the thing or the impetus that would make you want to spend time with someone in the first place? Because you wouldn't, like you said, you can build chemistry, but if I'm not spending a lot of times with this person naturally via work, via church,
Then you can't
I'm
build
not
other
gonna
type of
build it.
chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, meaning that if you're not spending a lot of time with somebody, I'm of the belief that you have to make sure that chemistry is there.
Well, if you're not spending a lot of time with somebody, they're not even in your life. Like, why you're in a relationship? It's like a long distance.
That's my point. Like, you even though you may be good on paper or you
But you're
work on
saying
church together,
you rather be with someone who you got that chemistry, that physical chemistry, but yeah, you don't even see. You're okay with that?
no, like you see casually, like at church every week or 2 times a week or something like that.
But how about if you don't see her at all?
If I if I don't see her at all, and what?
You saw her like when you see her maybe like once every 3 months, but you get that physical chemistry. Would you be more inclined to say yes to her? Whereas the other girl, you only see her the same amount of time,
Yeah,
but yet that physical chemistry is not there.
yeah, you go with the chemistry.
Even though you just said, I don't see you, I don't do anything with you don't see any of these girls.
Well,
but
you can shoot your shot. You can miss, but you can shoot your shot. I think overall, I guess like look more for compatibility than, like you said, than that physical response to, like, does your heart beat super duper fast? I guess the kind of chemistry that I'm talking about is more of an intellectual type of chemistry where like I just need to vibe with you and know that we can like laugh at the same things. And
like for example, that friend I mentioned last week, the Chris's friend that I had a crush on a lot, like I felt like I had I had physical chemistry with him, whereas like it was just like when we were together, we were cool, like we were just vibe of each other, but it was more physical than anything. So then it's like, yeah, we had strong chemistry, but that's like it was just purely physical. Like
yeah,
it didn't get much deeper. Like there was no future in that. Like yeah, it was strong, but that's it. You know.
it's true. And I think that's the first type of chemistry to go, physical chemistry, as opposed to
As you spend more time with someone too, I think.
why.
Because they're always there with you.
So what, they become less attractive in your head, or what?
No, not necessarily less attractive, but like sometimes, sadly, as humans, we tend to start valuing less what is very near to us, or we start taking for granted what was already guaranteed.
Yep,
That's what I'm trying to say.
that's fair. I think another thing when it comes to like wish lists and desires and things to look for when you come into the dating space is to look for a core, or what I call it, the alignment of core values. Look for that from the jump. Because like, why waste time? Like it kind of goes back to the whole casual dating conversation.
Yeah.
I think like I'm going to give you some areas and you tell me if you think I'm missing some when it comes to establishing a core value. You ready? Spirituality, children, lifestyle, and life goal, life mission.
Like knowing your stance on these things.
Yes, because
Yeah.
you have to kind of get an understanding of where you are so that you can know if you mesh with somebody, like after chemistry or compatibility has been established. So like even if I meet like a girl who her and I kick it off, but she wants a lot of kids, I'm not of that mindset.
No.
Should I continue with the pursuit?
No.
No. Or if we see things like super duper apart spiritually, should we continue on the relationship?
No.
On the pursuit? Probably not. And
No.
also when it comes to lifestyle and mission and long term plans, do you think you know where you stand on a lot of these things?
Yes. Yeah, I think I do know where I stand on most of this stuff. But I feel like before you even start looking for these qualities, you kind of have to do a personal inventory of what your morals and values are. Especially now more than ever, we have a lot of people saying, "I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm doing with my life," and like that can lead to obviously finding someone. You're gonna find someone, like they say, like when you don't know where you're going, you already arrived. So the same thing applies, I think, for your morals and your values. When you don't have those defined in your person and you live those values integrately to you, you already arrived with anybody that you get, because you like nothing is defined in your personal life. So I think as Christians, you got to do that personal inventory and be like, what it is I believe, what are my morals, what are my values, how am I living these out, before even starting to look for them in someone else. Because you may think you want this value, but if you don't even have this value yourself, sometimes you don't even know how it looks in other people. And in Romans 12:2, it says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So, like the world, obviously, like through TV shows, through media, they are trying to sell us a concept of
Lifestyle.
life, a lifestyle of your morals, your values, of what you think on abortion, what you think on kids. They are selling you something,
Sexuality.
everything. Like, so if you don't sit down for yourself and decide what it is that you're going to value, what it is that your morals, you're going to go with whatever is on your algorithm feed. So as children of God, we can't conform to those things, but rather we got to go to God first and just center ourselves in him, like we've always said, and through him derive those morals and values that he instills in us. That way we can look for it in other people too, because I am pretty sure that all the things that you are looking for in someone, that person, that perfect person or that person out there is probably going to want those things back. So you got to be those things too, because you can't request something you don't have.
So one thing I will say is that it's good to, like you said, spend the time to devote it to knowing what you want and knowing what your values are and rooted in the Bible as opposed to rooted in worldly things. While also recognizing that the person you're going to meet will not have and will not conform to your views 100%. The odds are 0% that someone will conform to everything that will believe everything that you believe, the way that you believe it, and things like that.
Well, yeah, because you're totally different people. But when
Right.
it comes to certain things, certain values, like for example, like spirituality, if you're unequally yoked,
It's not going to work.
that's a problem. So there are certain things where you need to be on the same page about. Like I feel like those things where you don't necessarily agree on are details, like the color of something, or like
I'll give you an
little
example.
things here and there. But like
Music in the church. That's been a divisive thing recently.
it's been a divisive thing, but I don't know, personally, I think as a couple, I think you kind of need to be on the same page of that, because that determines also what church you go to.
True.
So if you both want different things in worship, that there's already a door open or a temptation to start going to different churches, and then that can impact your time together.
I was just going to say that unequally yoked doesn't necessarily mean Christian and non-Christian, there can be unequally yoking within the church too.
Within your church.
Because, and this is something I wanted to touch on later in a different episode, but I guess I'll touch on a little bit of it now, which is the fact that you need to be centered in Christ and know what he means to you and have your own personal relationship with him, because you need to, be a bulwark in your own life. And you can also have the tendency, if you're not anchored, to lead your partner astray. Without realizing it. You may be together, you may, do whatever, but if you're not 100% sure or like 100% committed to doing things in a Christ-like way, you're not only going to take yourself out, but you're going to take your partner out too.
Well, like you said, we are the company we keep. And it's even more so with your partner or with your spouse, where you have such an intimate connection where your desire is to please them and vice versa. So you even start acquiring mannerisms, right? Mannerisms.
Yeah, you start to look like each other eventually.
Exactly. So it's no wonder that, your partner can impact your salvation.
Right. How important do you think making sure that there's compatibility in lifestyles?
I think it's
like when looking for someone.
I think it's super duper. I think it's the most important thing.
You just said spirituality was the most important.
Compatibility.
Not everything can be the most important.
Spirituality is incompatibility.
I know, but now I'm talking about lifestyle.
Oh, like compatibility and lifestyle. I think it also is super important too. I would say second to spirituality, because in your lifestyle it shows your habits. So you can have different things, and if you end up start kind of looking like each other in your habits, like for example, if someone wakes up super as a night owl but you're a early bird, that can affect and then change your whole routine, or you don't do as much stuff together because you lead totally different lives, whereas at least in some things you have kind of that compatibility in lifestyle, like let's say exercise, in food, in health. I think those are the big aspects of the lifestyle that you need to be kind of 100% on. And like I was saying before, the rest is just kind of semantics, but you kind of need to have some things in place and kind of the same in order to, or if they're not the same, at least be able to accept that the other person is like that and not complain. Because a lot of the times, sometimes we may get together with someone and think they're going to change. And
you can't expect going in someone to change for you.
Yeah, like I was saying with the looks, you can't expect that their looks are going to change, or that they're going to start taking
better care of
themselves or dress better. You can't expect that. Just like you can't expect that now they're going to eat healthy because you're together. That now they're going to
start losing weight.
Exactly. So I think you got to have certain things in that lifestyle that are kind of there, or accept that he's not going to, or he or she is not going to be like that, and fully % never complain about it because you accepted it and you accepted them.
That's why I know that for me, for example, I can't get together or even date somebody who doesn't like going out. I like traveling a lot. I like to go out. I like to experience new things. I like photography. So if somebody who prefers to stay home and watch movies, that's just not for me, dog.
No,
Granted, I like films. I'm a huge film buff, but I'm not. That's not my go-to. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you need to know the kind of person that you are, and be real with yourself. Don't try to convince yourself oh, I'm actually super athletic, and the last time I worked out was a month ago. It's honey, no, you're not.
Yeah,
you most definitely are.
You can't say you live an active lifestyle. You live more of a sedentary lifestyle.
Exactly. You have to be real with yourself. And that, Dharma and Greg, that's not to say that they can't mesh, but it does mean that you have to go in with the mindset of
that is who they are.
That is who they are, and that there will have to be compromises of some sort.
And then you have to ask yourself, is that enough?
Right.
For me I feel like a lot of times people don't ask themselves if that's enough. They just say like, oh, I might just accept it. But it's like, then you start resenting them little by little if you don't, if that's not even enough or you can't even cope with it, you should like let it go.
Yeah. Or not even pursue. What about your like life mission wise? How do you feel like you personally like the kind of person that you would look for? Like what kind of life goals would they have that would align with yours personally?
Life goals. Someone,
So I guess I mean direction, right?
or like where they want to go in life.
Because like for example, I don't think I would want to live in one place for 30 years or 40 years or something like that.
Okay, well, I
Like, are you that kind of person or what?
wouldn't mind living in a place for a long time.
You're weird.
Because you can always travel. Just because you live somewhere doesn't mean that you're stuck there. So,
I mean, you
I
are for
would,
the majority
I
of the
would,
time.
well, yeah, but I guess I don't value, I don't need, like,
Flexibility as a value.
no. I need flexibility as well. I guess I was trying to say is I don't need to be traveling 24/7 to feel purposeful or to feel alive.
Sure.
My type of traveling is more, I like it more to be more of the meaningful side of like doing something like volunteering or mission work. Like so
Where you are. Where you are.
where I am, or if I can or have the opportunity presents itself where I can travel somewhere else to do those things, or if mesh the two together. Like vacations are cool, but I feel like I would be more inclined to do more of those type of trips of like service than just sitting by a pool or just exploring all these waterfalls. Because I feel like a lot of the times people just, I want to travel the world. They travel the world and they come back just as empty as they left. But they saw all these places.
They have
So
nothing in here to show for it.
yeah, so I think it's all the intentions of life for me personally. That's why I wouldn't mind living somewhere and then just doing those type of travels. Because so somebody, I guess, would have to be stable, in the sense of like a stable job that they have, like that they're very responsible with all their like financials, their health. So I guess stuff like that would be values that I'm looking for compatibility, if that makes sense.
Sure.
What
I
about
think
you?
one point to say, well, for me, long-term plans, I mean, as a guy, it's different because as guys, we have to be the trendsetters and the leaders in the relationship. I think you posted a reel today on the page where it was talking about how women are like, hey, if I let you in my DMs and I'm giving you clear signals, like that's a green light, my dude. Like go in. And then she actually specifically mentions how she has to take charge and leadership in every aspect of her life, but in a relationship, that's one thing that she doesn't want to take charge in. And I think she's like a litmus test or an example of what women think in general. I mean, that's my feeling, and that's generally what I've experienced. So as guys, I feel like you have to know where you're going, why you're going there, and have a general direction set before you even start dating, because you can't offer a woman a wonderful, beautiful life if you don't even know where you're going, big homes.
No, you
Like
can't
you can't.
because you yourself are not
Well,
feeling
you can.
accomplished.
Well, yeah,
Because
and,
guys
and and
derive
you
a
don't
lot
have
of
to
their
be
value
accomplished,
in who they are from their job. So if you don't even
right?
know what you're doing with your job,
No, I don't just mean job. I mean in terms of life direction. So, like, you can have a good job and enjoy it at Napa Auto Parts, but if you don't, like, that's not a direction that a lot of women want to go in, or if that's where you just want to stay, like, those two things can maybe not be compatible. Just because you have a stable job doesn't mean you have a sense of direction. A sense of direction implies forward
it's
and
part of it. A
movement.
sense of a job is part of that direction.
Right. It's the
Because we are made to work.
right. I mean, God gave Adam a job before he gave he gave him Eve.
Eve. I guess that's what I'm saying. So it's part of that whole direction in life. And I think personally, as Christians, we all should have the same life goal or same direction of pursuing heaven and trying to bring as many people as we can to Jesus. I think that should be everybody's mission and vision in life. Now, how everybody goes about it is obviously can be different because we all have different talents and gifts and different ways God is calling us to implement those. But I think at the end of the day, that whole serving God and just heaven, I think that's gotta be the what is the word you're saying? That vision for your life. I think that should be every Christian. And so you mentioned the leadership of the guy. I think that's a whole other that's a whole episode in and of itself. Of leadership and women, you know how they say be submissive. That's a whole other thing. But it just reminds me that, like, you know, guys, leadership is a leader is the one that serves, and Jesus shows that in his leadership, right? He washes people's feet.
Yep,
so, like,
yep.
you know, as a man, I think personally that leadership is shown in his service and in the I'm gonna leave it there because we can talk about it.
It's true. Let's talk about non-negotiables. So when you're approaching the dating arena, we just talked about, you know, desires and wish lists and kind of what to look for. Now let's talk about like different negotiables and standards. I think when it comes to those things, we need to be realistics here too. So for example, this is becoming a thing more recently than not. I don't know why, but a lot of women are vocalizing what are icks. Like, oh, this is an ick of mine. Where
men have icks too.
I get it, but I'm talking about social media and how it's becoming more of a thing. And it's 100% of the time been women.
Trendy.
How, like, where there are interviewers going around the streets like saying, oh, well, what's an ick? And then some of the girls, like, completely serious and probably completely inebriated at the time, say the most stupidest thing.
When he puts on his blinker.
Yeah, or when like, how dare he?
Yeah, I mean,
or like how, like, why would he put his socks on before his pants? Like, that's so weird. It's like, dude, leave the man alone.
See, but I feel like it has this term ick now, but it's nothing new. It's the same as, like, what back then be like, well, if someone puts in the toilet paper this way, it's a deal breaker. So I feel like back then they were just called deal breakers, and now they're just called icks.
You were rightfully criticized and ridiculed for being stupid.
Yeah, so throughout the generations, you're still being ridiculed. Now they just have an ugly name for
I think
this
it's being
word.
more accepted nowadays in the world. So what I'm saying is, when it comes to stuff you won't accept, be realistic when it comes to that. And I think another thing, tell me if you agree with me here. Do you think that types can be flexible? So if you go into the dating space and you say, okay, I have a type. I like short, brunette, or black-haired women with beautiful smiles. But then I meet, this taller redhead or blonde.
Yes, I think they can be
flexible. Do you
flexible.
feel like types can be flexible?
Yes, because it all depending on what it is that you're valuing and looking for other people. Because if you're going from the stance of you're looking for values and characteristics in someone, you can find the same values in a tall girl and a short girl.
Yes.
So if that's like, if you're just going based off of the physicality of it, probably doesn't change. But if it is about morals and values,
I feel like it is. It can't for guys and women. So for example, when you say it doesn't usually change,
when it comes to physicality,
yeah.
If you have a type, usually you go for that. But when it comes to like morals and values, I feel like you can find those in different people.
Yeah, but so then, what do you say to somebody who can find somebody within their type to just ignore other beautiful people out there?
Well, no, because, where are they facing this type from? Their values or the physicality?
I see what you're saying.
Now, that's what I'm talking about. When if you find yourself, I think sometimes falling from the same type of person, you got to do some introspection there, because, like we talked about before, there's our patterns, and you play into those sometimes.
It's true. Well, what would you say are some good non-negotiables to have when entering the dating space as a woman?
Yeah, like if I'm asking from a guy,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality for one,
Mm-hmm.
having that personal relationship with God, that's a non-negotiable. Punctuality, or at least the effort. I think effort. If anything, at the core, effort is the non-negotiable. I need to see someone that's trying. You don't have to get it right, because we're not right, because we're not perfect. But effort, I would say that's a non-negotiable.
I feel like for women, a good one would be to be a team player. I think that's a nice general one.
I mean, to be open-minded. Yeah.
Open-minded.
Open-minded and and an active listener, good communication. I think that's a
That's
non-negotiable.
unisex, yeah.
So, but I think you can group a lot of these things under effort, because even though you can meet somebody that, they're a work in progress and they're not totally there, but they are trying.
Mm-hmm.
And there you can actively see it in their lifestyle. They're not just saying, I'm trying.
You see, even if it's minute progress, but it's progress.
Yeah. So, you may not have good communication skills now, but if I see that you're trying, that's way more valuable than just, someone not even trying.
How about you personally? Do you feel like you know your non-negotiables?
Required from a guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me some.
Well, I mean, I already said some. Good communication, responsibility.
Here, you stick to 5. How about 5?
Okay. Good communication, honesty, personal integrity, spirituality, and
let's skip spirituality, because that's like a you can't even get in type of non-negotiable. Like you can't even get in the club if you're not spiritual type of thing.
you can get in.
Damn, B.
Hear me out. That's where effort comes in, Josh. Because let's say someone is not Christian, but they
Okay.
just found God.
Okay.
And you see them actively trying that effort, and you see it in their life. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying. Yes, would I want them to be at a more mature stage in their spirituality? Yes. But I'd rather have someone that's actively trying, who's maybe a baby spiritually, whereas
And you would have this guy pursue you?
having a guy who is in the church but doesn't live out any of the values. So
Right. That's fair.
yeah, I would have a guy pursue me that's learning about God, for sure. Because it's the effort. I think the effort for me is just, and you actively see it, not just think that, because that's when it changes from you actively see it, whereas you're hoping they're going to change. Those are two different things.
That's true.
What about you? What are your top 5?
So the first one I would say practical. Huge fan of that. So practicality, communicative. That's a non-negotiable. You gotta tell me explicitly, because guys aren't mind readers, what it is that you want and what it is that you need. Another one is I need you to be smart. I can't.
Your level smart.
No.
Okay.
Because I realize that my level smart is rarefied air, so I can't expect somebody to be there when it's not for everybody.
Okay, so how smart? Because that can be different for anybody. And are we talking book smart, street smart?
I feel like
Because there are different types of intelligence.
yes, but if you're high in one, the odds of being high in others is very high too. So if you're street smart, the odds are you may not understand math the same way, but you can connect dots really quick, really easily. That's what I consider smart.
Okay, so smart.
Yeah, so smart for me would be good. Book smart for me would be excellent. Just enough to where I can explain a complex concept and she be able to understand it and rebut back to me with either how I'm wrong or ways that she, that I may be seeing things the wrong way, or give me something interesting to think about. Just something to challenge that challenges me to where I don't feel like I have to carry the intellect of the family. Of the relationship.
Okay.
I think another one would be for me is a definite non-negotiable is like I would like for her to be, I need her for her to be silly.
Silly.
I need that because I'm like in my head in terms of like, difficult concepts or just business ideas or something like that, and just putting it to work. I need something or somebody who can like see life from a more impractical way, where I see it from a practical way all the time. So I need a little bit of an escape from that. And somebody who can help me see it in a non-logical way and have fun with the minutia, with the little stuff. I feel like that's definitely awesome. And then another non-negotiable for me is I definitely need her to be generous.
Okay.
Love that. I feel like I'm generous in a lot of ways, and I would like that reciprocated.
That makes
If
sense.
that makes sense. How about some noteworthy no's, like stuff that we shouldn't, like just in general as Christians, kind of accept? What do you think?
Stuff we shouldn't accept.
Mm-hmm.
People that do drugs, people that drink.
Mm-hmm. And again, do these in your book land under the if you drink you're an automatic no, or are you drinking less? Are you an in now? Kind of how we were talking about like learning about God, but if you're a baby, that's okay as long as you're making progress. So when you mention these drug and alcohol use, are you talking about
Like if they did that in their past life, I'm not judging them. But if they are like
no, if they're like, weaning it out, they still do it, but they're doing it much less now.
like with their walk with God,
Yes.
I would probably wait until they have stopped in the weaning part of those things.
Okay. I think pornography would be a good one there too.
Yep.
Until you stopped.
Yeah.
Because that can be hella addictive.
Yeah. So, because that stuff is not just ruining your mentals, like you say, but also your physical. And if you are working on your walk with God, you see the progress through the stuff that you let go. So if you're not even letting these stuff go, that is evidence too of what's going on spiritually. So yeah, so I think, but those are obviously hard. Like I feel like those things are a case by case basis, but
as a general
rule, it's no.
Fair.
Like the same way that if you like, we don't party or we don't go to clubs, so
that's a no.
That's a no. So everything that God says we shouldn't do is a no. is a general no. Yeah. I mean, do you have something apart from what God says is a general no?
Well, I mean, I just have some general terms like health standards as a general no. So health standards in terms of alcohol, in terms of, what do you call it? Other things that are harmful to your body, that if you do them willingly, that's an automatic no. I feel like if you live a worldly lifestyle, that's an automatic no.
And by worldly lifestyle, you mean?
As a Christian. So you can call yourself a Christian and an Adventist, but if you live a worldly, and that's hard to define, worldly lifestyle, but I categorize it under actually this is like an actual judge did this. It's a principle called if you know, I know it when I see it.
Well, yeah, because it's by your fruits that you're going to be judged. So
right.
If you're a Christian, it should be seen in your lifestyle.
Agreed.
And if it's not seen in your lifestyle, something's up.
It's true. That's true. And then also, I think lastly, it's a noteworthy no to, like, if you don't vibe with the person, if you can't just sit in the room with them and just be comfortable, that's an automatic no when it comes to dating.
Yeah, but
do you disagree?
Especially
as a guy,
like the comfortable part.
Like if you like if you're a guy and you just don't not automatically, but like if you just don't connect with a woman, like you're not gonna lead, and you're not gonna be a good pursuer, I feel.
Yeah, I guess with the comfortable part, I would say that kind of grows too, because the same as you wouldn't give a stranger your address. Like, if you just meet a guy, like, yeah, sure, he's smart or whatever, but you're not immediately comfortable with this person. Now that you enjoy their company, I feel like that's more of a something you can judge sooner rather than later.
True.
But I feel like comfort is something that's acquired over time. But I also want to talk about how there's this huge saying that for like, you don't know what you want in a relationship until you try it. I know I've gotten this a lot, like, from my friends, that like, oh, you haven't gotten in a relationship, like, you don't know what you want in a guy, like, how would you know, because you haven't tried it. Have you heard of that before?
Isn't that the same argument for sex and premarital sex? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, you don't know, like, why would you marry somebody if you don't know if you're even sexually compatible?
Yeah. So, I feel like that's something that always,
which from a worldly perspective makes sense.
That's always something that's a rebuttal to when you say what you want in a partner. Like, for example, I have this friend where I'm like, well, I want this, and she's like, well, how do you know? You've never had those things before. How do you know if you actually like those things?
Well, are those principles, or what are they?
That's what I tell her. I'm like, these are principles and not just things. But I feel like a lot of the times that's the argument that people make. That, like,
That's true.
Well, you don't know if you want a stable guy because you've never been with a stable guy.
That sounds dumb.
Yeah.
To me, right?
No, but like, it's something that I think is seen a lot in like social media and stuff, of like exploring yourself and all this stuff, and it can be a dangerous path that you can go down as a Christian because you hear it so much.
That's true.
Not just with sex, but like with anything.
Give
Because
me
you talk
another
about,
example.
we don't do drugs or we don't drink, but there are so many other things in life where it's just like,
Yep.
they're so inviting, and then people are like, well, you don't know. It's not like, you won't know until you try it. And
You feel like partaking in that mentality is only a one-way trip to pain and hurt and separation from God.
yeah, so that's why at the end of the day, you got to be focused in your list on principles of characteristics, morality, because those things you don't need to try to know that you need them. Like,
True.
respect, honesty, like, integrity. Like, these are innate human things that we need, or that we like, that make a good person, where
Right.
that way that argument becomes just void of like, okay, yeah, I haven't been in a lot of relationships, but I want this and this. Tell me this is not good in a person. Like, I want you to tell me right now. And they can't say nothing,
It's true. It's true. How about boundaries? Let's talk about boundaries, setting
Okay.
boundaries when you approach the dating arena. I feel like there are 4 areas where boundaries need to be set. I put them as emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, spiritual boundaries, and practical boundaries. Let's start with emotional boundaries. I feel like, personally, as a guy or a woman, a boundary to set is to not trauma dump when you're meeting or going on a date for the first time. You need to set a boundary of, this is how much I'm going to share at this point in the relationship. This is how much I'm going to share at another point in the relationship, or when we cross certain thresholds. Now, that is fluid as heck because every relationship is different. But I feel like going in with the mindset of emotionally regulating yourself is a good one. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree 100%. Boundaries are not just for yourself, but they're for other people. And they're part of good communication. You can't have good communication without boundaries.
I agree.
So.
I feel like gradually opening up as you feel safe is a good starting point. So that that person can't hurt you more than you've been allowed to be hurt. I guess I don't know. That's kind of where my mind went, but you don't open yourself 100%. I guess when it comes to the hurt.
I think
I don't know.
I think it's got to be gradual in the
That's what I'm
sense of
saying,
like,
yeah.
you're not telling a person you just met today your life story most
Right.
of the time, right? You got your anomalies of someone you just meet, and it's like you feel like you've known them forever. So, like, as your relationship progresses, the same way your conversations progress and get deeper. So, like, if you just met somebody, just the same as you meet somebody now, you don't have the same standard or expectations from the same person that you met 10 days ago, right?
Right.
So there's that different familiarity. So the same goes with the boundaries. You don't have the same ones because it just all goes gradually to how your relationship is going. And then when it comes to the getting hurt part, I feel like it's harder. It's easier said than done, but you have to realize that nobody can make you feel anything. That
What?
like you are in charge of your own emotions
Okay.
and your own responses. That like, especially in love, like you can get hurt, but you have to trust in yourself that you're strong enough. That you're strong enough, right? That you're not just that you're strong in it of yourself as a person, that just by exposing your something to this other person and them hurting you is not going to break you. But I feel like that's something that you have to work on yourself internally, because if we just always go off of like, oh, I'm scared they're going to hurt me, it's like nobody can hurt you unless you allow them to hurt you. And that goes a lot with emotional regulation and how your perspective on things.
Yeah. Good call on saying it's easier said than done, because it's not. It's not. It's definitely not that simple.
It's not that simple, but I feel like it is something that you can do intentionally, little by little.
Set out for you. That's true. What about physical boundaries? I think in regards to that, I think they may vary slightly, but it should look pretty similar across the board when it comes to avoiding going too physical too
Yeah.
soon. I feel like as a general rule, you avoid sexual intimacy.
And sexual intimacy is not just having sex. It's a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, like for example, the Bible, like we've said before, the Bible said if you look at a woman to lust, you already committed sin in your heart. So if you can do that with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, just in your thoughts. So it's not just of, oh, we didn't go all the way. It's in your thoughts and your intentions of all of this. Those are boundaries that you need to have too.
Agreed. I think that one specifically, you need to have the mentality and the mindset clear from the jump, because the more that you get familiar with this person, the more or the easier that it becomes to start to flex and bend those rules and bend those boundaries, which is normal in the sense that you're going to become more physically intimate with someone that you're close to. That's perfectly fine. But just know that, don't cross
It goes to a certain point.
Maginot line, let's call it, to where don't get so close to where you can't stop yourself. I guess. I don't know.
I think when you're in a relationship at that point, together you need to rely on God for that a lot, because like you said, with proximity, all of that stuff is just natural.
Yes.
So it even goes to show how it's even more important to have that personal relationship with God before you get into a relationship, because everything just becomes more intense and easier to fall into.
True.
But if you already have the mentality and you're relying on God on all these things, especially like in sexuality, when it does come, when temptation comes at the door, like, you're already going to be strong enough. And then if your partner, that's the importance of them having that same mentality, because together you can hold each other accountable. And I mean, you always talk about like the infamous line. We always talk about like how far can we go before it's a sin. I feel like as Christians, a lot of
That's
times
the wrong question.
we play with so much with that of like, well, how far can I do something before God considers it a sin? And it's like, you can't even, that's already a thought for like failure. Like, you're already destined for failure if you're thinking of how far you can go. I think it's so important to go to the Bible and ask God specifically on physicality, and for him to show you and guide you in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have our thoughts and we have what we think is right, but God knows our hearts and he knows what we can endure.
One thing I will say is that as guys, for all the guys out there listening, I mean, we need to be the leaders in regards to this, because it's more common than not that it's the guy that initiates illicit behavior, and you know, it's just natural, I guess, for guys to want to go further, faster. But as guys, we need to be the leaders and be more spiritual in that.
Well, yeah, because you're the ones that they want to have it initially faster.
Right. But there are cases when it's the other way around, and the guy needs to be the one to say no and to,
Yeah, but I mean, if it's vice versa too, the girl has to say no too.
Right.
It's
my point is for the guys not to even put you guys in that position to begin with.
Yeah, none of us should be putting ourselves in that position
to begin with. Yeah,
so
that's true. How about in terms of spiritual boundaries? I put here that I specifically, I mean, it's not really a boundary, but it's more of a standard, I guess. As Benny is barking at the shadow next door, is that I know I personally can't mess with somebody who doesn't elevate me spiritually. So if you're not, I guess, well versed in scriptures, I know for a fact that I'm going to have an issue with you, like an issue with intimacy with you.
Well, that sounds more like a standard than a boundary.
That's true, but I guess what I mean in terms of or as a boundary is kind of like, what do you think of when I say spiritual boundary?
I guess maybe when it comes to imposing things.
You say proposing things?
Imposing things on your partner or spouse.
Oh, careful with like attributing them to God when it's really something that's impetus of you type of thing.
Yeah, I guess it's more of like God can convict you of something, but he hasn't convicted me of it. But you're imposing it on me as it's like, do it or die. I think you have to study the Bible together, but your personal relationship with God is different from mine. And the way you do things is not necessarily the way I'm going to do things. So I think that's a boundary you have to have where, like, you can't impose anything spiritually on someone. Because
Fair.
God doesn't even impose anything on us, because that's something tyrannical. So I think that's how I would categorize spiritual boundaries of you can't impose.
That's true. And then I guess what I was referring to was having the boundary of not speaking for God when it's really you. So, you hear the joke of like, oh, God told me you were my wife. But he hasn't told her yet, type of thing. I feel like being or having good judgment when it comes to speaking on what God really thinks is a good rule of thumb there. When it comes to spiritual boundaries, I guess.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I have practical boundaries, and then I have an acronym, which is I think is fair, and I enjoy it a lot. The first one, I'll be honest and say that I heard it from somewhere else, which is T, time, energy, and attention. And then I added the word or the letter M for money. I feel like as a guy, you need to have boundaries on your time. You need to have boundaries on your energies, boundaries on your attention, and boundaries on your money. Because women can be exhaustive on your money. Women can be exhaustive on your attentions and energies and time and things like that.
But I could say the same thing about men.
And you should say the same thing about men.
All the same ones. So I think it just applies for everybody.
Agreed. To make sure you just know going in how much time you want to commit, what energy you're going to put into this, how much attention can you give, and also in terms of money. Although the money one applies more to guys than it does to women, because guys are the ones who financially usually run, what do you call it, or finance a relationship more often than not.
Usually.
More often than
Now
not.
less. It's becoming less and less, but yeah, usually.
What makes you think it's becoming less and less?
Because
Just because women make more and more doesn't mean they're spending more and more on the relationship. That's a completely different thing.
especially when it comes to marriage, Josh, if she's making more money, she's probably spending more money.
If
Which
she's
which
making
makes
more money,
sense, because if you're, well, it all depends how you guys manage your finances, because some people do 50-50, some people do like equity, so it all depends. But all I'm trying to say is, that whole notion of like the guys are the sole breadwinners and they spend more money is becoming less and less, as women, not only are educating themselves more, are acquiring higher paying jobs, whereas a lot of the times men are, they're not doing those things and have less money to offer anyway. So, and then you have the whole splitting it thing depending on your culture. Like in the Netherlands, they're very split worthy.
egalitarian, yeah.
Yeah, so it all depends on your culture and what it is you agree on. So it's becoming less and less.
Do you feel like guys spend less now that women spend more? I feel like men don't spend any less.
Um,
I've never
I don't
heard a
know.
woman say, you know what, don't spend it. I got it. Not once.
No, I mean, I haven't heard it, but I mean, I'm sure there's women out there that have said it.
Sure. Yeah.
Not that they're the majority, no.
Hell no. And then lastly, how do you feel like desires and expectations change with time and circumstance? Because I feel like your desires and what you want in someone, when you go into the dating space, may be one thing in 1 year, but it may change with experience and with time. And to know that that's normal, it's
Yeah.
okay to have those things shift around, and that the things you wanted in a guy 5 years ago, if that's
It's not the
changed
same.
now, that's okay. Like don't feel like you're being disingenuous to your 19-year-old self
No.
because you want something else. And also, like, biological clocks are a real thing, so your expectations and your standards may be different when that's clicking, or when you get older, as opposed to a 22 or 23-year-old. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would say that usually your standards don't change. Usually you either add or you take away. I think it's more of your expectations that fluctuate. So like if you have the standard of like you want to have a family or become a mother or whatever, that hasn't changed. Maybe that your timeline, your expectation of it changes, but that standard stays the same. So as people, we evolve continuously. So that's why our desires or what we want changes. We're very fickle minded, and one day we want one thing, one day we want another. Usually that's what desire is. So that's why it's super important to ground yourself in your standards, because your standards, I feel like, are very they're like your foundation of life, kind of like where you stand on God, and those don't change. Well, your desires may change,
Your outlooks may change.
yeah, but your standards kind of like they hold you through it all.
That's fair. Is there anything else that we missed when it comes to, like, what do you call it, entering the dating arena with purpose, direction, and intention?
I would say that as Christians, since we have this purpose, intention, like what you were saying, I think we shouldn't play into the dating game.
I want to talk about that next week.
Yeah, we could talk about it next week, but let me just talk about it when it comes to like expectations.
Okay.
When in the whole dating game, there's like these certain expectations of like, oh, you don't text, you
Back.
don't double text, or you don't do this or this, blah,
You have
blah,
to
blah.
give a certain amount of time before you text back.
Yeah, like those little things like that, those can play into expectations or whatever. But I feel like as Christians, we shouldn't have those. Because if you are intentional, you are communicating correctly and being integral to who you are, there is no need to play into this thing or feel insecure. And I feel like it's something that we can, a lot of the times, culture and people around us peer pressure you into. But like being integral to who you are is part of not falling trap into the dating game. Whereas letting things flows naturally. Like if you want to double text. Like that's not a bad thing. When did that become a bad thing? Like if you want to call like these
But Abby, don't you know that means that you're desperate?
You know what, Josh? You may think that's desperate, but that's just that goes back to my standard of who I am and what I want to communicate.
Come on now.
So if you're seeing it from other people, like, oh, what you do, how you show, like, oh, they'll think I'm desperate. You know what? Let them think whatever you want. But if your standard is to communicate yourself correctly and you need to send 2 messages to show that communication appropriately, send those 2 messages. Don't wait until they respond and then clarify. Like, that whole little dating game should not be taken into consideration at all when it comes to your expectations and standards. And your standards are the ones that carry you through the peer pressure of this dating game.
That's true. What would be some other ones other than texting? Like to not let the world influence your expectations and thinking. Like I would say, in terms of promiscuity. So like, don't expect Christian girls to be as free with their bodies. I don't know. That's one, I guess.
Or I would say, like, for example, don't vocalize what you're looking for too early on, because they'll think you're desperate or something. Usually that's
or don't show interest early on.
Or don't show interest early on, you know. Like that's part of this whole dating game situation, that you got to go back to your standards, who you are, and show that. And you know, if you don't want that, and if you think I'm desperate, you know, you probably weren't good for me anyway.
Yeah, if being clear and honest and open is desperate to you, then we are clearly not meant for each other anyway.
Yeah, that reminds me of this movie I was watching with a friend last night. It's called Marriage Retreat. And one of the couples, they do PowerPoints to communicate. So
that's cute.
So their friend, so they're like three pairs of couples, right? Like, and then one of the two guys were talking of like, has this guy been calling you? He's been calling me too. He probably has a PowerPoint he wants to share with us. He has some news. And they're like, well, I don't want to see no PowerPoint. Like, because the last PowerPoint he showed them was about testicular cancer.
Oh my goodness.
And this other guy's like, he just likes to over communicate. So I thought that part was super funny, of like this whole PowerPoint thing, how they took it to an extreme and kind of made it look bad
and corny
but whereas like it's better to over communicate than under communicate.
It's true,
but it was still funny.
How about this one? I feel like as Christian and Adventist women shouldn't expect or maybe not shouldn't expect, but maybe not look for the suaveness that come from worldly men. And by suaveness, I'm talking about like the smooth talking dudes that use sensuality to get to you.
You shouldn't expect that sensuality from a Christian guy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's alluring, that's sexy, that's nice and exciting.
And you shouldn't expect, I could throw it back right at men, where they shouldn't expect a woman to be all
sensual.
Yeah, like with the way she dresses.
True.
Or things she's willing to do. So like it goes both ways, just it shows up differently depending on the sex.
It's true.
Sex of the person, like male or female.
Yep. Agreed. So as a recap, I feel like we kind of touched on a lot, actually. We've been at this for what? Almost 2 hours at this point.
No, we haven't.
We've been at this for an hour and a half. But we talked about, different desires, making sure that we say that they're good. Just, be realistic about them, to look for compatibility, Make sure that the person you're looking for aligns with your core values. Be open to the leading of the Holy Spirit. We talked about how, there are different non-negotiables to make sure that we keep them quality non-negotiables, not necessarily, physical and superficial non-negotiables. And then we also talked about different boundaries: emotional, physical, spiritual, and practical boundaries as well. I feel like a combination of all of that will get you in the right mindset to approach dating in a healthy way that won't what was I going to say, that will lessen the time with someone who you probably aren't compatible with in the first place, as opposed to wasting your time with them and
Agreed.
getting closer to your yes. So any other takeaways, B?
I would say the most important thing is living a life of integrity first before having any standards, expectations for other people. It first starts with you and your relationship with God, and through that you develop the standards that you have for yourself and for other people, and then you can live a life fully on your own and in the process of getting to know somebody and being able to communicate good, active listening, being open to other people about what it is that you want for yourself, not for them, because they might not listen, they might not care, but at the end of the day you communicated. So be integral to who you are, because nobody can take that away from you.
Boom. How about you close us out in prayer?
Okay, let's pray. Father in heaven, Lord, thank you so much for another day of life that you've given us. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to sit here together and talk about what it is that we are looking for when it comes to standards, expectations, desires. Lord, thank you so much, because in your word, you provide everything that we need. It's a guide. We are not here alone just making up all this stuff willy-nilly, but at the end of the day, you are the one that guides us through all of this, Lord. So I pray that you not only help me, Josh, but all of us just seek you first, so that you may be able to impart the standards that we need for ourselves and for others in order to live an integral lifestyle, grow together, and ultimately go to heaven. Thank you for all that you do for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. And Michael, we miss you, buddy.